Chapter 32. Thou shalt not kill. Life runs its rounds of living, climbing up from mote and gnat, and worm, reptile and fish, bird and shagged beast, man, demon, diva, god. If one might save man from his curse, the whole wide world should share the lightened horror of this ignorance, whose shadow is chill fear and cruelty its bitter pastime. Light of Asia. Note, this lesson is intended to advocate neither meat-eating nor non-meat-eating, but to inculcate in all the tolerance which can see others follow lines of conduct different from their own without condemnation or a feeling of superiority. The command, thou shalt not kill, is plain and distinct, with no modifying conditions, yet it is given upon the same authority as that which in the vision of Peter said, Rise, Peter, kill and eat. Although the vision of Peter was primarily to teach him that even though a Jew he should call no man unclean, nevertheless the voice of God commanded him to kill, and he had to learn his lesson through his willingness to do even though against his race prejudice. We have explained to our pupils something of the great law of the one life, or the great creative principle set into chaos to evolve through all forms and bring the world stuff left over from a previous world period to perfection through physical and spiritual evolution. We have tried to picture this great principle as a stream of life force animating and evolving everything through which it passes. As this is the force back of all evolution, an emanation from the Absolute, which is all life, there can be no such thing as killing in the sense of annihilating this stream of life force. But since the above command is given, and not only in one sacred scripture but in many, it must have an important inner meaning as well as an outer. The only sense in which man can kill is to separate any form of life from this stream of life force, or to dam it up or refuse to permit it to manifest. A good example of such killing is given by the yogis, brahmacharis, and bhikshus, the so-called holy mendicants of India, described in the Light of Asia. Some day and night had stood with lifted arms till drained of blood and withered by disease, their slowly wasting joints and stiffened limbs jutted from sapless shoulders like dead forks from forest trunks. Such practices prevent the one life from manifesting through certain parts of the body, hence such parts may be said to be killed. Another form of killing is found in the various kinds of mental torture which, even in this so-called enlightened and Christian country, are assiduously followed by many who are earnestly seeking spiritual enlightenment. While we are wont to look upon all forms of bodily torture as horrible and revolting, many hold the soul torture is the only path to perfection. Such think they must make life as hard and unhappy both for themselves and for others as it is possible, that they must refuse to eat that which they enjoy, must starve their bodies, or must scourge their mind and conscience. These are also forms of killing, because they dam up and refuse to permit the life force to manifest in and through these conditions. Just as mind and spirit are more important than body, so is mental and spiritual torture far more harmful and degenerating than any merely bodily torture that can be conceived of. And it is exactly the same effect, namely, to separate the tortured parts from the stream of life-giving creative force, which is the Christ, or the creative principle of the Godhead. The one fact which we would have that we could proclaim in words of fire that all the world might comprehend is, God is love, and love is life and growth and joy and peace and immortality. The only bar to evolution is to kill, to separate either body, mind, or heart from God love, no matter what mistaken teaching brings us about. Just as long as the idea prevails that to be joyous and happy in life is to be far from God, just as long as love is considered a clandestine fruit, something forbidden to be eaten only in secret and bitterly repented on later, that to gain the pleasant things of life you must close the door on God and turn aside the stream of the vital Christ life from you, just so long will this world be a hell as it is today. The only way to cleanse the Augean stables of life miseries is once more to turn the living waters of the rivers Elpheus and Peneus into their old and originally intended channels, and let the streams of love and life and immortality flow into and through all. This was one of the fabled labors of Hercules, who symbolizes strength or power to accomplish that God-given power by which mankind can find its birthright. Through the strength gained by accepting and believing that God has sent His Son, the Christ principle, the creative aspect of the Absolute, into chaos, because His force was all that was needed to awaken seemingly dead matter into life, that it might evolve toward perfection. We open the floodgates and, like Hercules, turn this river of force into the stables that are filled with man's animal passions and emotions, and the stables are cleansed. Thou shalt not kill means that you shall in no way dam up or cut off the life force. But the question Peter had to face was, has man the right to destroy any lower form of life, either for food, self-preservation, or for the purpose of hygiene? The Hindus have carried the literal interpretation of the command, "Thou shalt not kill," to its extreme limits, practically sacrificing human life in preference to that of insects and other noxious and pestiferous forms of life. Poisonous snakes, which the Hindus refuse to kill, cause the death of thousands of human beings annually. Yet it is a common sight to see these same Hindus treat their domestic animals with such cruelty that a European can scarce endure the sight of their suffering. It is known that the plague, which so frequently devastates the country with its toll of millions of lives, is transmitted by rats and other rodents, and is largely made possible by the unclean condition which permits fleas, lice, and other blood-sucking parasites, infesting indiscriminately the dead and the living, to flourish undisturbed, that fatal fevers are transmitted by mosquitoes, and that many other scourges of mankind can be traced to similar sources. And yet there are serious and earnest seekers after truth who ask if it is right to destroy such forms of life. There are many in this country who say they have no right to kill the disease-transmitting housefly, but who will carefully exclude it from their dwelling without a thought of the suffering poor who cannot afford screens, who are too ignorant to protect their children from flies. Hence disease and death is spread among the poor by the very flies that the well-meaning students have excluded from their own homes. As to the killing of the dumb beast, your brothers, the literal view of not killing animals for food may be a helpful step at a certain stage of spiritual growth, but later on it is well to consider a wider view of creation and the interdependence of all kingdoms. For using vegetables for food is just as much taking life as to use animals for food. Man, being a step above the lower kingdoms, owes love and helpfulness to all. The matter of what kind of food you place in your stomach, as long as it is wholesome and satisfying, is of so little importance to spiritual growth that we give it so little attention, leaving such matters of personal preference to a common sense of each pupil. Each one, however, is responsible for the condition of all his bodies and must give them due attention, the attention necessary to keep any high-bred animal, of which high-grade work is expected in good physical condition. The one essential thing is to have a strong mind and a strong body, to live in such a way that no part of the body, mind or soul, is shut off from the stream of divine life. Will ye, for love of soul, so loathe your flesh, so scourge and maim it, that it shall not serve to bear the spirit on, searching for home? In fact, thou shalt not kill any cell, molecule, or atom in any of our bodies. Hence we do not presume to lay down set rules as to diet. For spiritual growth is not a matter of what goes into the stomach, else those races who have been vegetarians for ages would be spiritual masters long ago, but of the devotion with which you live out the ideals of your heart. Not that which goeth into the mouth defileth a man, but that which cometh out of the mouth, this defileth a man. If your ideal is not to eat meat, and if you find your body and mind thrive, and if you have gained more strength, courage, and vital force and mental power without it, then live out that ideal and find out by the results of your life if it be best for you. Study your fellow men and see if a purely vegetarian diet has brought to its devotees greater health of body, vigor of mind, breadth of soul, love, tolerance, and compassion. One of the objections frequently brought against meat eating is the supposition that by eating flesh man will be taken on the passions of the animal. These are 2 points to be considered in this theory. All occult students know that the desire body is karma, or the animal soul, and that it leaves the body at the moment of death. Hence could not in any way be taken on by eating the flesh from which it was withdrawn. The second point is the claim commonly made by vegetarians, that by abstaining from meat their animal passions are lessened. The fact is that this result is attained simply because, by a decrease in their stamina and virility, their passions are temporarily masked. A perfect man must be one with all his forces in full vigor, but under perfect control. To weaken his powers to such an extent that they no longer require control is taking a step backward rather than forward, for such weakened forces are only dormant, not mastered, and in some life will assert themselves with all their accumulated power and demand expression. Persons who have thus weakened their powers are very apt to think they have no passion, hence permit a feeling of superiority to grow up in them. Some time in their evolution, however, they must experience the full strength of all animal desires ere they can even begin really to conquer. But this does not mean, as taught by some schools, that it is well deliberately to arouse the passions for the sake of controlling them. It does mean that each must be in full possession of all his powers and learn to master them and make them his servants, for they are stepping stones by which he must climb. We also hear much to the effect that all masters and adepts were vegetarians, while the truth is that only those who have reached mastery from non-meat eating races were vegetarians. Right here comes in a fact we have so often reiterated, namely, that to reach mastery each soul must live up to the light and conception of truth as revealed to him in his own religion, nation, and environment. The truth is that many, many souls have reached mastery through races that did eat meat, such as the Egyptians, the Norsemen, Celts, etc., and especially those who, living in a cold climate, subsisted almost entirely on meat and yet reached mastery, all of whom are largely represented among the masters of the Great White Lodge. Hence, the importance of a vegetarian diet in attaining mastery cannot be very great, for we cannot believe that the Elohim, having created a planet with so many differing climates, necessitating such a variety of diets, would shut out from attaining ultimate perfection all who were placed in parts of that planet where climatic conditions made animal food a necessity for life and warmth. It is the thought force put into the subject that is a great factor, namely, what thoughts you hold to what you constantly direct your mind. If you think continually of what you are not to eat and how you are to manage without it, you are putting quite as much creative thought force upon your food as is the glutton who thinks only of what he is to eat. In both cases, the subject of food is taken out of its proper place, as anything wholesome that will properly nourish the body, and is given undue prominence, even worshipped, making those who worship it slaves to their stomachs, instead of looking upon food as the mere fuel that runs the engine. The mind cannot run constantly upon food and at the same time meditate on spiritual things or be filled with loving thoughts for the help of humanity. Instead, you are apt to divide the world into meat eaters and non-meat eaters. As good must evolve out of all evil, so must we gain wisdom to handle this problem, and by our thought force help make it possible for the masters of wisdom to use everything in condition, no matter how apparently evil, to bring about ultimate good. There is no such thing as death, merely various changes in form in the manifestation of the one life. Man is the result of the normal development of all the lower kingdoms. His body contains all the elements, mineral, vegetable, and animal. This fact alone shows that man has absorbed and transmuted all the lower kingdoms and has thereby raised them into a higher expression of the one self. Hence the atoms of the mineral, vegetable, and animal kingdom, which have been swallowed up by man, have thereby reached the fullness of life expression, just as a man must be swallowed up, and from one viewpoint be killed and absorbed into the spiritualized being who shall be more than man. The mineral is killed and eaten or absorbed from the earth, and its form of life expression destroyed, that the vegetable may live. The vegetable is killed and eaten or absorbed, that the animal may live, and the animal gives up its life for man, just as the lower personal man gives up his life for the spiritual man. Every form of life is born into the environment where its natural prey, food, is found. If you reject the teaching of the evolution of the one life through the sacrifice of the lower form, then in despair you must agree with the dictum of certain scientists who declare the world to be but a monstrous charnel house. In each instance, however, it is the mere physical expression of the one life that is altered, for it is not cut off from the stream of life force, but is brought into contact with a higher and more perfect expression of that force, and hence cannot be said to be killed. It is much as though a plant, having outgrown a confining pot, was transplanted into a larger one, where it would have greater freedom and could express a greater amount of life force, or is like a tadpole absorbed and transmuted into a frog. This is the true meaning of the Mosaic law, a life for a life, exchanging a lower form of life for a higher, so commonly misinterpreted in favor of capital punishment. Jesus expressed the same truth when he said, "Except a corn of wheat fall into the ground and die, it abideth alone, but if it die, it bringeth forth much fruit. For the seed must be killed or give up its form of life and be absorbed and transmuted ere the higher form of expression can evolve." This is the scheme of evolution as it would be if there were no sin and no disobedience to the law. If love prevailed, evolution would be but one continued sacrifice of the lower form of the one life to the next higher, that the more highly evolved form might express to a greater degree the one life. But man's disobedience to his divine guidance has brought cruelty and suffering into the world, so that all creation groaneth and travaileth together. That is, all creation, whose end and aim is to give birth to and to bring to perfection spiritual beings, now brings forth in pain and anguish where it should bring forth in joy and thanksgiving. Now everything preys upon something instead of yielding itself a glad sacrifice to the next higher form. If no life were taken in cruelty, it would naturally and without pain give up its life current, that it might be turned into a higher and more advanced channel of expression. If this did not take place, evolution would cease, and the life wave could not lift the mineral into the animal kingdom, nor the vegetable into the animal into the human, or the human into the divine. Through man's selfishness and unbrotherliness, there is enmity and lack of understanding between man and all the lower kingdoms, which can only be remedied by love and wisdom. For instance, if meat eating were abolished, would that overcome enmity and cruelty? Such change must come from a change in man's attitude toward life, from within, from the heart, and not from any outward act or the mere abstaining from an act. At present, man is swayed mainly through his love of gain. As long as the flesh of animals has a commercial value and commands a higher price, when the animal is improved in quality, well cared for, well fed and sheltered, man will go on improving conditions for the animal, and thus perfecting and advancing it in evolution far more rapidly than ages of wildlife could accomplish, even though he does this merely because he finds it to his financial advantage. All these factors are utilized by the masters of wisdom who are guiding evolution, to give a decided impetus upward to the evolution of the animal kingdom. For the animals must reach a state of perfection as animals ere the wave of evolution could sweep them into the next higher kingdom. On the other hand, if animals had no commercial value, they would receive no attention from man, would be allowed to run wild, would be cruelly hunted for sport, killed off to rid the fields of them, and many starved or frozen in winter. Thus it would take many, many more lives as animals ere they learned all the lessons and reached perfection as animals. For even the animals must learn the lessons of love and brotherhood with man in all kingdoms ere they are done with their experience as animals, and these lessons they must learn from man. The mere killing, which is but a momentary pang, does not cause a thousandth part of the suffering experienced in a wild and neglected state, the slow dying of starvation, the being torn to pieces by other animals, or put to death by their own kind, as happens to the old, the sick, or disabled among most animals. Another objection to meat eating is the brutalizing effect the killing has upon the butchers. This is indeed a serious question, but those who are butchers today are also evolving and are today a step above their former incarnations, in which they may have been human butchers, that is, the executioners, inquisitors, or the hired assassins so common in former ages. By the time there are no more souls who need such an environment in which to learn their lessons and evolve, there will be no more need of butchers, for the great law never places a soul in an environment that is not needed for its further evolution. In protecting himself against mosquitoes, flies, and other noxious insects, man has the right to sacrifice their form of life, for all lower forms of life which prey upon or work injury to man are the result of man's abuse of the life force. Hence he has the right to make the life force manifest through other forms which will be helpful to the race. Therefore, when you destroy these lower forms, hold the thought that their life force shall manifest through forms that shall be helpful and not inimical to man. It is not true brotherhood merely to drive them away from you to prey upon your less fortunate brothers and sisters. At no point in evolution, however, has any form of life the right to take the life of its kind, for by so doing it could not fulfill the law of compensation by raising it to a higher stage of evolution. Nor would any form do this did not man send forth murderous thoughts and emanations. This applies even to the poisonous weed which chokes out the life of the flower beside it, to the forms of life which devour their young and their kind. For in such cases, instead of being raised to a higher step, they have to repeat the same step again. But it does not apply to those forms of fish and animal life which prey upon less evolved forms of their own kind. The whole keynote of the universe is love, and as long as man sends out the reverse of love, or in harmony, death instead of life must result. However, the plea of advancing evolution cannot be used to excuse or palliate the taking of life for sport or vanity. Man has no right to assume the responsibility of changing a form of life unless conditions have proved that the sacrifice of the lower form is necessary for the life or best good of a higher form, mankind. To kill animals for amusement, or to kill birds for their plumage, that it may add to the vanity of women, or to foster the state of mind which cannot see anything beautiful or uplifting in the song of birds or the gambols of a young animal, the sight of which only arouses the desire to kill, is not only pushing man back to the level of wild beast, but because it is not transmuted into the higher form, is retarding the evolution of the stream of life force, and is spreading enmity toward man among the lower kingdoms. It also dams up love and compassion in his heart and prevents his spiritual evolution. This is killing in the full sense of the term. Man is a free will agent and can choose his own path, but certain it is that ultimately love and harmony must prevail, else man fails to do his duty to the lower kingdoms by failing to put the imprint of love and brotherhood upon them, for all forms must evolve together. Man is responsible for the lower kingdom and thus do his duty by them and help them to take their next step in evolution, for he has reached a point in evolution where he must consciously become a co-worker with the forces of evolution, must recognize, correlate with, and begin to use the great creative Christ principle, which is the one way, the truth, and the life, by which alone evolution can reach its ultimate perfection. If man fails to do this, he stops his own evolution, for he cannot expect to receive from the kingdoms above him that love and help which he withholds from the kingdom below him. Man will never lay down the tasks of aiding the lower kingdoms until all are lifted up and redeemed through divine love. There is always an inner or esoteric truth beneath every phase of life, for all things work together for good, even man's mistakes being utilized. All steps are necessary to make up the ladder. The vices of men become steps in the ladder one by one as they are surmounted. Wisdom seeks deep in the mysteries of life, being for the germ of good beneath every outward seeming air condemning anything. Seek it the way, by testing all experience, by utilizing the senses, in order to understand the growth and meaning of individuality, and the beauty and obscurity of those other divine fragments which are struggling side by side with you, and form the race to which you belong. Do not condemn anything but cruelty, impurity, and want of tolerance and brotherly love. Cultivate love and tolerance for all your brethren, and avoid the thought that your way or your view is superior, or is in any way better than another's except for yourself. Above all, avoid the spiritual pride that results from the thought that because you do not or do eat meat, Fletcherize your food, eat raw foods, follow a particular dietary or bathe in a particular fashion, you are holier than your brothers who do differently. For there is no one thing that holds back soul growth more, that is more subtle or is harder to overcome than spiritual pride. Thou shalt not kill means then that thou shalt not do anything to retard evolution on any plane, to shut away any portion of the universe from the universal life force, to foster separateness, or to retard the spread of brotherhood, harmony, and unity on all planes. In the Light on the Path we read, each man is to himself absolutely the way, the truth, and the life. And Master Jesus said, speaking of the Christ within, that I am the way, the truth, and the life. These two texts have literally the same meaning. The letter I is formed by a straight line which geometrically represents the Christ principle descending into matter. Hence it is this life-giving force or principle which is the way, the truth, and the life. But as each one manifests this in his life, he can individually become the I, meaning, however, not the human personal self, which is matter, but the animating principle of deity manifesting through him. Therefore, from this standpoint, each one must take upon himself the responsibility of becoming the way, the truth, and the life. Not only for himself, but by his life, his influence and example, because he stands upon what is at present the crest of the wave of evolution on this planet, for all the kingdoms below him, as well as for all his fellow beings. For the way and the truth is unity, or the one life. As above, so below. Therefore, as to diet, we lay down no set rules, we only state principles. Let each pupil take the matter of meat-eating into the silence, and find out the best way for him to attain the above-mentioned end. And we feel sure that after that he has wrestled with the question conscientiously, and has found the many differences and the many apparent contradictions which must be reconciled and blended ere this oneness with all can be even approximately attained. There will grow up in his heart such a tolerance and patience with all his fellow students, whom he can plainly see are seeing the same end. There will be no condemnation possible. Let not him that eateth despise him that eateth not, and let not him which eateth not judge him that eateth. The instant any soul reaches this point where he recognizes the unity of all, and the diversity of methods by which all are seeking unity, he can but reflect in his life and conversation the illuminating power of the divine Christ love, and will then become an avenue through which this creative life stream must flow to all humanity.